Raise your hand if you've ever been afraid of something. Okay. Now keep your hand raised if you have had a fear for over 5 years. Now keep your hand raised if you've ever overcome a fear. Thank you. You can put your hands down. So obviously I'm no psychologist, but I have taken multiple psychology classes and shown interest in psychology in multiple ways. I possibly wanted to receive a minor here at Cal Poly in psychology, and I've done much research on this topic of psychology, and being a human, I have my own fears too. So that's why I'm here today, is to talk about the psychology of fear. I want to do this by differentiating between a fear, differentiating between what a fear is and what a phobia is, and then explain the process of how fear is recognized and processed throughout the brain, and finally share techniques to overcome or reduce a fear. So, what is the difference between a fear and a phobia? I'm glad you asked. In a 2010 journal titled Fear by Jeffrey Lohr, fear can be described as the most important emotion for the survival of the human species. So when we fear something, fear can tell us what to do, how to act, and how to keep ourselves safe in multiple situations. It can tell us when we're not supposed to do something, like internally, and it can give us our natural fears and cause reflexes. Fears occur based on our own experiences and cognitive processes, so fears are made up of our own personal experience, and every single fear is individual. While phobias are extremes of fear, and they typically do not pose much danger at all to the person, and there's more seen as a potential threat. Phobias are types of things that make people want to avoid it at all costs, so they will actually change certain parts of their lifestyle. And a 2005 article titled Fighting Phobias I found on the database gives some examples of what phobias could be. One being, a very common one being the fear of flight, or the phobia of flight, where people who have travel jobs will actually tell their boss that they cannot travel anymore because they're so afraid of flying, so they'll drive to the places, but that hurts your career a lot. Another one that I found was that bees can cause children to run away if they've ever seen a bee, and hide away for a day at a time, which I thought was kind of crazy. And another common one is dogs. I know a lot of people do love dogs, but based on personal experience, people can develop phobias and can avoid dogs by hiding away inside and things like that. So overall, fear and phobias are not interchangeable, and they differ in their intensity. And a 2003 article titled How Fears Differ from Phobias also shines light on that treatment for a fear and a phobia are very different. But I'll get more into that in a little bit. But I want to move into how the brain processes and recognizes fear. I want to do that by starting to define a few terms. Okay, and the first term, from a Duke graduate, Julia Layton defines a few of the brain structures involved in how the brain processes fear in her How Fear Works article. And the first one is the thalamus. So this is the part of the brain that decides where to send incoming sensory data coming from your eyes, your ears, your mouth, or your skin by touch. And then that information is sent to the sensory cortex, which interprets the data from your eyes, ears, mouth, or skin. And then this is then transferred to the hippocampus, where information is stored and retrieved in conscious memories, and it processes a set of stimulated established context. And how I remember this one is it's hippocampus, and on a campus is where you learn. So you store and retrieve information on a campus, so it's hippocampus. And then the next one is the amygdala, but I always called it the amygdala because my psych teacher in high school called it Amy, and because this one decodes emotion, determines possible threat, and stores fear, fearful memories. So you call up Amy if you're in a situation that you've been in before where you know fear can occur. Amy can also activate the fight or flight response that's held within the hypothalamus. And the fight or flight response is when a fear stimuli is exposed to you and an immediate reaction occurs after that. So the PhD author Irina Milosevsky described in her book, Phobias, The Psychology of Irrational Fear, that fight or flight is a series of neural and physiological mechanisms that rapidly activate the body to confront a threat, which would be to fight it, or to escape it, which would be to flight it. There's also a freeze response that occurs to some people where they literally freeze in fear, and sometimes this can lead to very serious panic attacks, which are not good for the body. This is an image of the parts of the brain involved in the fear response that I just said. So the sensory cortex is at the top of the brain, which follows the thalamus, the hypothalamus, the amygdala, and then the hippocampus. Now I want to transition into our last topic, which is that overcoming fear or lessening a fear is possible. So Melinda Smith and co-authors gave 3 techniques that will help to decrease a fear over time in a 2018 article titled Phobias and Irrational Fears. So the first technique is to face your fear one step at a time. So let's say you have a fear of dogs, and the first step would be to look up images of dogs online, and then possibly watch dogs outside your window, like your neighbor's dogs, and then go outside when your neighbor's dogs are outside, and then possibly ask your neighbors if your dogs are friendly, and if they are, and if you feel comfortable ask to pet the dog. The next is to learn how to calm down quickly, and a lot of this is practiced with breathing techniques and patterns. Another common one is listening to music will help people relax, and right now I'm kind of freaking out. Okay, sorry. And then the third technique is to challenge negative thoughts about your fear or phobia. Are you over-exaggerating it? Are you thinking of the most catastrophic thing? Are you thinking that every time you get onto a plane, your plane's going to crash no matter what? Or are you thinking of ways you could resolve or contradict your fear? To find more information to back up these 3 techniques, I went to the databases and found a 2011 Italian psychology study that focused on the fear of flight. It supported the 3 techniques stated because the researchers' therapy work confirmed that cognitive behaviors and desensitization will decrease fears and phobia throughout simulations and other examinations. So basically that exposure and time will decrease fears and phobias. We discussed the importance of distinguishing the difference between fear and phobias, how certain parts of the brain function, that fears and phobias can be overcome. Many people suffer from fears and phobias in today's society. Maybe some of you. I know that I have my own fears, and I just hope that you guys can kind of take this information to possibly overcome, or maybe help someone overcome, or understand their fear or phobia a little bit more. Thank you.